So I wanted to talk a little bit about this truth of no self. Other people call it enlightenment. I don't really prefer that term because it sounds super lofty and metaphysical. But I'm bringing the metaphysicalities into reality for your life to learn and understand. If you ever heard of this term, there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is. And I think it'd be most helpful to describe to you what it is not. So, the truth of no self, otherwise known as enlightenment, is not some sort of lofty kind of woo woo saying that you hear people have where they say, "Oh, I meditated for a few minutes and I'm so relaxed," or "I'm so calm," or maybe I had a little vacation, or, even meditated in a cave for a few minutes. Maybe I just broke up with somebody and I just found myself. Or maybe, I've been struggling and I met this goal, or I watched a lot of YouTube videos or smoked a lot of weed and now I'm very calm and centered and relaxed. Or, I picked up some incense and stopped doing cocaine and found myself. And now I'm enlightened. Enlightenment is also not a belief system of any kind. It's not like a religion where, maybe you've done some practice with some yoga, or maybe you've done some reading on some Hindu books and they told you a little bit about, you read some poems online about what it's like to not be suffering anymore, things along those lines. Like I said, it's not a the belief system that somebody adopts necessarily. Enlightenment is something, the best way I can describe enlightenment is something physical that happens to your body through a handful of techniques. Something as physical as, for example, turning on a light switch. So if you walked up into a dark room and there was a light switch there, all that, BS that I was kind of saying about enlightenment is not. Imagine if you went up to that light switch and you were contemplating about this light switch, like, what is this light switch? And you started sitting down and you started praying to this light switch every night. Maybe you read a lot of books about this light switch and you understood some fantasies about this light switch, or you had some egoic ideas about what it'd be like to turn on this light switch, or you went to some of your friends and you bragged and you're like, there's this light switch in my room and I'm imagining what it'd be like to turn it on. Maybe there's some ideas about how the electricity or the wiring goes and makes it possible to turn this light switch. All of that is concepts, abstractions, and theory. Um, Doing the actual enlightenment work would be walking up to that light switch and turning on that light switch, and the room becomes bright. It's something physical that happens to your body. That's the most powerful way for you to understand that what I'm talking about is not some lofty metaphysical nonsense. It's something that happens to you that can scare the ever living shit out of you and turn your world completely upside down. There are a few practices to attain this. Obviously, you can meditate, you can do self inquiry, there's some yoga techniques. I'm not really going to go into all the hows. I'm just really trying to explain to you what this is. So, imagine your whole life, whether you're 20, 30, 40 years old, you believe that you were the physical body. You believe that you were inside your body. That's what you believe. No matter if you say, well, maybe I'm a soul or a spirit, blah, blah, blah. Even if you're a religious person, you still really believe you're inside the body. And if you hold up your hands, if you haven't really done a lot of this work, you won't understand what I'm talking about. But if you hold up your hands, you might believe that you are inside these hands. It's almost like you believe that you are inside of this body and this body fits you like a glove. Maybe you hold your hands up and it's almost like you believe that there's maybe a ghostly outline, outlining every single one of your fingers, and you can go like that, and you're like, "Oh, I am inside my body. I feel inside my body. I am the one who feels inside my body." So imagine this. Imagine you're laying back in a dark room, and maybe you're laying on a comfy bed, and notice how you say the words, "I feel my body." Not like you're touching your body, but your arms and legs are all spread out. You would say, "I feel my body." That's you believing that there's a you inside of your body feeling your body. And this is what we have to break down. So through some techniques, you can attain a state which, many ancient yogis and spiritual practitioners have attained and have understood for thousands of years. After you do these types of contemplative techniques or yoga or psychedelics or something like that, or you can do this completely sober. Might take a few years, might take a few tries, but what eventually happens is that you're not having a realization about what enlightenment or no self is. It's not some type of you think and then one day an epiphany comes into your head and you go, "Oh, maybe I'm that thing. That's the thing that I am. Okay, that makes more sense." No, it's something physical that happens to your body. See, right now, there is a sense of self that you have, regardless if you know or believe it or not. There's a sense of self, and that's me saying, "Oh, you are blank," or "I am blank." Replace the blank with your name. If my name was Steve, I'd say, "Oh, I am Steve. I feel Steve inside of here." Steve is the one inside the head experiencing all of reality. That's what we're talking about. That idea of a sense of self. With these enlightenment practices, you realize that that sense of self is a combination of three things. It is images in the head. Maybe when you imagine you imagine the face, or you imagine maybe like a third person image of the back of your head, or maybe you imagine some images from your life, maybe you as a kid, or normally it's just pictures of your face. Pictures, the second one is thoughts. There are thoughts in the head that say, "I am blank, your name. I am Steve. I am John. I am so and so, whoever." That's another concept of the sense of self. And number three is the feelings in the body. So again, you're not going to realize this if you haven't done all the work, but you identify with a feeling. And a lot of the times it's a feeling in the head. You feel a head pressure. And ever since you were a kid, you've adopted this belief system that you were the feeling inside the head. When you feel your head, there's an identity of you attached to that, or in the chest, maybe. Some people have it in the chest. And when you look really, really closely and see, you'll notice, what are those three things? It's thoughts in the form of images popping into your head, maybe a picture of a face or a body. It's dialogue in the head. That's the two flavors of thoughts. It's images of the face and dialogue in the head, saying, I, me, my, this, that, blah, 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 I am whoever, I am here, I am in the body, I. And then there's feelings in the body that you identify with. But where is you? Not where are you, but where is you? Where is you located? And part of this self-inquiry that you're going to be doing is you're going to be looking for the real honest to goodness you. And that's the whole idea of self-inquiry. That's how you attain enlightenment of the truth of no self. That's one of the few ways. But if you keep looking and looking and looking, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, sometimes it takes not as long as that. Sometimes it takes, only a couple months. I've never heard of it done in less than a few months. For me, I had my first mystical experience of no self after 3 years, so I'm gonna give it to you straight. This is, you're not used to this because you've spent 20, 25, 30, 40 years, depending on how old you are, um, believing that there's a self inside the body, so it takes a lot of work to undo all that. And once you really look with your awareness and you try to find where that sense of self is located, you realize that that sense of self is constructed of all those three things put together. So imagine there was a knot, and this knot had three strings. One was images of the face, one was the dialogue of words in the head saying me, my, and then another one was a feeling inside the body. All three of those strings, imagine them all tangled together, and that is what creates that illusion of self. Is all three of those strings tangled together. And when we do self-inquiry work or we do any other type of spiritual work, what we're doing is we're necessarily untangling the strings. And then one day you're gonna get close, and you're gonna feel something different, and you're gonna say, "What is happening to me? What is going on?" And you never knew what you were getting into. You watch some videos here and there. You watch this video. Maybe if I could plant the seed, you'll actually do this. Very little people will actually do this. Or you watch some other videos talking about this experience of no self. You'll start to feel different in the body. Maybe the mind gets more relaxed or still, or everything gets a little too quiet. And it's almost like something's about to happen in your body. It almost feels like you're about to orgasm almost in a way, not literally, but it's like there's like a climax coming. You're feeling something off. And then like a slip knot with those three strings. All of a sudden, all at once, you're going to be doing this inquiry work. You're going to be pulling at these strings, tugging at all these concepts of both the thoughts of the dialogue in your head and images of the face of the body, and then questioning the feelings of the body. And then imagine like a slip knot where all of a sudden, boom, you pull at these strings and the knot just disappears. And you're going to be gone. That sense of self is gone. And all that's going to be left are images, thoughts, and bodily sensations. But you, the entity who is doing all these perceptions, who is feeling, who is thinking, who is seeing, who is tasting, who is touching, who is having emotions, that thing, that entity you believe that's been there for so many years, that everything has converged to, all those sense perceptions, that entity is going to disappear. And here's what that's going to feel like. This is the good part. Imagine there was a universe that nobody existed in. It was made out of consciousness. In this universe, we call this qualia. In philosophy, we call this qualia. In this empty universe, there were smells floating around. There were tastes floating around. There was a body floating around. There were thoughts, there were emotions floating around in this bubble, in this field of consciousness, but there was no one there. It would be a ghost town. Imagine there was just a body floating, didn't belong to anyone. There were thoughts floating around, didn't belong to anyone. There were smells and tastes and touches and ideas and concepts and emotions all floating around. But there was nobody there to experience them. This was an empty universe. And that's the whole concept of the book Haunted Universe by Stephen Norquist, is that you can discover this to be true, is that when you have this realization, you are going to disappear completely. And that physical feeling in the body, you feel like there was a you in the body, that this body has, a glove. You're gonna feel you disappear from the inside of your body. And the reason that's so scary is because you have never identified with anything other than the body your entire life. So a lot of people say that enlightenment is bliss and happiness and hugging hands and everyone loving each other, yada, yada, yada. It's gets to that point eventually, but it's very, very terrifying when it first strikes you. The first thing that's going to happen to you when you become enlightened is you're going to say, oh my God, what is happening? Stop, 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 stop. Because see, you had no idea what you were getting into. You have concepts and ideas and theories of what I'm saying to you right now, but you had no actual idea what was coming. Something very, very terrifying when enlightenment happens is coming to you. And when it happens, you're going to wish you never started any of this practice. You are going to wish that you never watched any of my videos. And you're probably what's going to happen is going to cling on to that sense of self. You're going to try to really get it back tightly as much as you can. And you're really going to wish that you never did any of this practice. Why? Because that's a scary feeling, disappearing from the inside of your body. And you're not going to like that feeling. You're going to hold on to it and you're going to swear you're never going to do this self-inquiry again until you get curious again. And as the saying goes, curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity killed the ego in this sense. You're confused right now because you're saying, well, what is actually happening right now? If there's not a me, then how are these senses happening? How is there sight, sound, emotions, taste, touch, like all this stuff? How is that happening? Now, where do I go once I leave the body? And that's a funny question. And just hear me out here, but this is the true nature of what you are. So you're in this bubble of perception right now, right? A lot of people don't even understand what I'm saying when I'm talking about this bubble perception. But say, for instance, like me, you're in a room right now. Notice how you're kind of trapped in this perceptual bubble. See, if you're in a room, you can't see the walls outside of the room. It's not like from inside of the room you can look out and see out, or look in the room from standing outside or see the opposite side of this wall that you're looking at right now. You're in this perceptual bubble field that consists of all those five senses and more. And this is the difference between the false self and the true self. The false self is I'm so-and-so inside the brain, inside the body, all these perceptions are converging to. The true self is that you are going to discover that you are, and the best way to describe this physically is you are empty space. You are empty space inside of this bubble of perception. So imagine that this bubble of perception that you're inside of this room, you can feel empty space almost like, it's almost like go like this. You almost become the air in the room, except it's more empty than air. Notice how if I move to the left right now, there would be empty space in front of the camera. There's empty space all near the walls, everything like that. This whole room is empty space. Empty space is how, the table, the chair, your body, it's how they exist in 3D awareness. It's this empty space. Now, what your fundamental nature is you are this empty space. So imagine a hologram. We take a hologram, a spherical hologram, and we take a little toy action figure body or whatever, and we're moving it around this three-dimensional holographic bubble. And so your whole life, you've been thinking that you are inside the head of that action figure moving around this bubble, right? You are almost like a point inside the head of this action figure, which all of those, five senses and more are converging into, and that point of inside the head is you. When you leave your body, you disidentify from being inside the head and you become the empty space inside of the room. You physically become it. There is no point of convergence that these things exist in. You are the empty space, the empty awareness. So you get this spacious feeling where you disappear from the inside of the body and you almost become the air that everything exists in. So that's a very shocking thing to occur, because when you think of you, what happens first? If you say, oh, imagine your friend. If I said imagine your friend, you would think of their face, because that is what you most identify with being. That person is their face. If I say, what do you look like? You would get an image of your own face. That's what you think you is the image of the face. But when you become enlightened, your new face, you could say, is this bubble of perception. That's what you look like. You don't look like the face anymore. What you actually look like is empty space. So if you could picture in your head right now, almost like empty space, it's almost like you are this bubble of air. So if I said, think of you, instead of thinking of the face, you would almost imagine this bubble of empty space, and that would be your new face in a way. So there's many different ways to attain this state of enlightenment, but like I said, you're not going to like it. But why would you want to do this if it was so scary? Well, I'll tell you one thing is you could probably guess what happens when you disidentify with your body. What's the greatest outcome of that? Hmm? What can't be possible anymore if you successfully disidentify with your body? That's right. That's right. Death is not the end. If you finally discover that you are this empty space inside of this room, this bubble, you don't cease to exist once the physical body dies. Because what you you are this bubble of perception. You are this empty space in a room, and this empty space has existed for eternity. And you think that you were born into this world from your mother. You think you were created once you came out of your mother and once the body was here. Actually, what happened is there was this empty space, this empty awareness, this empty consciousness that has existed for infinity. And one day, a body was birthed into this empty consciousness. And then all of a sudden, the words started chirping in this body's head saying, oh, me, this is my bubble. These are my thoughts. These are my feelings. These are my actions. These are my senses. These are my smells. These are my tastes. These are my touches. These are my sights. These are my sounds. All this. These are mine, 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 mine. And the ego saying mine, mine, mine. And thoughts are saying mine, 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 mine. But what actually happened is this consciousness did not belong to anyone. It was almost a bubble floating in empty space. And then all of a sudden, the body came out and it started imagining that there's a self and that all these things belong to that self, like taste, touches, smells, sights, colors, shapes, all that kind of stuff. But you are this impersonal field of consciousness that never belonged to any sentient creature, that was here forever. Consciousness is almost like an object. It's not a subject. It's a material that things are made out of. And then the ego gave birth and it started having all these thoughts about me, my, and that created this sense of identity. Therefore, taking the image of the face, image of the words and the dialogue in your head and feelings in the body. It mixed those three things together, created a knot, and boom, that's the fake sense of self. So notice everything that I said today is that this is something very physical that you can do, something very physical that you can attain, and even more benefits than just avoiding or realizing that death does not exist is the fact that when you disappear from inside the head, there's no one to get offended. There is nobody to get upset. There is no one who is at fault anymore. There is no one to protect. And because there is no one to have all these things anymore, just everything ceases to be a problem because I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm worried about the future. I regret the past. Me, my. Once the you is gone, there is no one to suffer anymore because there was never you who did anything wrong. There was never you who had any decisions over any actions. There was no one whose fault it ever was, ever. It was just consciousness the whole time. There is no person to get hurt or to get offended by or to get offended in general at all. That's why they call enlightenment the end of suffering, because you realize that there's nothing wrong anymore. There never was. There was no person to be hurt, and there is no death that will happen once the physical body dies. And once you realize this and you get past you surrender all your attachments to the body and to the self and things like that, then you're going to experience nirvana and bliss because there's no ego anymore, so everything is beautiful, everything is magnificent, and you never die. But until then, you have to realize that the ego and the sense of self is the last thing you ever want to give up because it's going to feel like you're dying, and you are. You are dying, but not harming the physical body. So that's something that you're going to have to take into account. You're going to have to weigh those risks versus those benefits, and you're going to have to realize that eventually, if you have a love for the truth and want to see the true nature of reality and what you are and what you always have been, this is the path to do it. If you want to hide in a shell and be afraid of your true nature because it sounds super scary, you could do that too. There's nothing wrong with enjoying the mundane pleasures of life and keeping that sense of self and just living an ordinary life. But if you're one of those people who, like me, who wants to see how far they can really exit out of this matrix and finally see what reality is and has been that you've suspected for the longest time, then this is the way to go. And I will post many videos in the future explaining how to attain these methods. I will post more guides. I will do storytelling of how it happened to me, different steps that you need to take, and so on and so forth. But until then, I'm glad that I have just planted that little seed inside your brain that makes you think maybe reality is not exactly what it seems.